Hello, and welcome back to my small part of the universe. My name is Hailstone. Today we will be covering quite the out-of-the-way request from Europa to research into an odd group of moons that are overseen by something called the Company and to look into the creatures therein. So please, sit back, relax, and let us begin. What the heck was that? Was among the last words I have ever heard from the hired crew I was provided with to study this assortment of moons around Big Grin. Even uttering such a phrase makes my skin crawl, almost as if the Hawkmother follows me all the way here to wherever Jove's death has thrown me. Yet I still feel like a bike horn could be sounded at any time, and it probably will. Though I will say, space-time shenanigans aside, to have such a copious handful of moons orbiting a gas giant to retain any amount of complex life without an icy shell is truly fascinating. I am unsure what class of star that this giant orbits, but perhaps due to thicker atmospheres and a calm red dwarf without flares, it could lead to life in such places. Though that brings us to the subject of current speculation. I lost my first research team on the moon known as Vow, though I suppose research team may be a very loose term in this case, as they seemed more interested in collecting loot for something called the Company and engaging in something that I can only guess as a ritualistic dance, rather than collecting information on the local fauna and flora. Though there was one thing that broke the research team out of their looting fixation. A local creature, or at least one I assume is local, at least akin to its more leafy features. The limited logs I could access on this creature refer to it as a Bracken, or as a Rapex folium. Though the research team also started to blurt out Flower Man, not necessarily a fitting name in my opinion, but if it gets the point across. The Bracken is a near humanoid-esque entity, standing at a height close to or slightly taller than that of the average human. The skin of the creature when illuminated is colored like a rutabaga, of a darkish red splotchy hue. The form of the creature is quite gaunt and lanky, lacking significant mass on the torso and lower abdomen of the creature, with its limbs being long and slender. The legs of the Bracken are quite odd, being hoof-like or knobbish in appearance, almost like the cut end of a branch or stem of a bush. In addition to this creature's lanky posture, the name Flower Man originates from the 10 or so broad, leaf-like protrusions sticking out of the back of the creature, being green in coloration once visible. The Bracken lacks any visible mouth and two dim white eyes that can be clearly seen even through the darkness. As well, the head of the Bracken holds several deep folds and dents. Behavior of the Bracken. The Bracken is a shy and rather reserved creature until its territory is crossed. At that point, the creature becomes swift and aggressive, preferring to take out its targets quickly without being seen. I often lost crew without other members of the team even noticing, only to take stock later of a rogue flashlight along with a smear of red being all that's left after a Bracken has dragged the unfortunate victim away. Typically, when a Bracken encounters an intruder to its territory, it will stay as silent as possible, hoping to stay out of the sight of its victim, and for an easy kill. Though when a Bracken is noticed, it will become stressed at being viewed, making a short, perhaps warning noise, something almost akin to like that of a rattle, seemingly by vibrating the leaves sticking out from its back. Once a Bracken has been sighted, it will often go out of its way to stalk a particular target approaching from angles and corridors that target in question isn't looking at, and the Bracken will do this with incredible speed, quickly maneuvering behind the unfortunate soul and quickly snapping their neck, and dragging their corpse off into the darkness, usually never to be seen again. I find this behavior of the Bracken rather interesting. While it is natural for many creatures to go for the neck for a easy, non-exhausting kill, the way in which the Bracken does it is almost too human-like, instead of doing it out of, say, natural instinct. In fact, it almost feels like the Bracken does this knowing it's the quickest way to kill off a standard human. Aside from the uncanny knowledge on how to disconnect a brain from its cord, once the Bracken has disposed of a target, it will quickly drag off said target for some unknown reason. I have heard chatter about something called Bracken rooms or some form of favorite spot that the Bracken attempts to gather said bodies. But in my own records, research, and generally just asking around, I was unable to truly confirm this in any manner. though for what reason it gathers bodies is quite strange. As of right now, I suppose there are two possibilities. One, it serves as a warning for other humans or perhaps similar creatures in its territory, letting them know it could easily be them next, in perhaps some vain attempt to scare them off. Two, it could be gathering bodies to feed on later. While the Bracken has no visible way to intake food, that doesn't mean it can't. And we just don't know the method. Perhaps it being some horrifying proboscis or some other way that many would just rather not see. On the chance that the Bracken fails to get behind its target in time and is seen, the Bracken will pull a hasty retreat, attempting to put as much space between itself and the target as possible, as the Bracken simply doesn't like being seen. This will give a small window of opportunity to those who are knowledgeable enough to possibly survive the Bracken stalking them. Though this isn't foolproof, as evidence has shown that staring at a Bracken for too long will seemingly override the shyness that this creature has and will angrily charge those who it feels are watching. Though I will add in my experience, this isn't always the case, as I have had individuals chase down the Bracken trying to get a better view of it and are never attacked even within visual range. This brings up an interesting facet of thought. How does the Bracken know it's being viewed? Most, if not all of its prey, if that is the right word here, wear thick, body-covering suits with a dense gray or black plate covering the face. It could be that the Bracken has some form of extrasensory sense that causes it to know when it's being viewed. Or it could simply be that the Bracken knows better, studying many similar creatures over time that invade its territory and has figured out the best way to deal with them. Though, of course, they may be more familiar with humans or similar creatures, perhaps more than they should be. I suppose my final thoughts on this creature, at least as of right now, is where did it come from and why is it so strangely human-like? First, one would think that the Bracken is some form of mobile plant that evolved perhaps on Val or even March, and that is a possibility and not one I'm willing to rule out. But truly, I don't think it is a plant. In fact, I believe instead of carrying a common ancestor with the Forest Keepers, who we will talk about in due time, it may share more of an ancestor with humans instead, which if true, leads me to figure two possibilities of what this creature really is. One, I believe the Bracken, due to not only having a humanoid appearance and a 5-digit hand, may be the result of some horrid mutation as the result of local pollutants or some form of substance coming into contact with a human, resulting in the first Bracken. I believe this may account for the Bracken's insistence on staying inside human structures, perhaps seeking shelter like a human rather than relying on its natural form of camouflage, and at least having some form of instinctual knowledge on human anatomy, though this does not account for the rampant decomposition that Brackens go through once they die. Though it is possible that this leads to another clue to what the Bracken is, though this one might be a bit more or less clownish and rather outlandish. Due to the immediate decomposition of the Bracken's body, I believe it may be some form of colonial creature, made up of a loose colony of spores and other plant matter, that just simply come together to imitate a human form. And, well, once it becomes useless or immobile, it simply comes apart with the individual spores or other creatures seeking survival elsewhere. This may also explain the Bracken's behavior to remain in a dark setting, being composed of plant-like material that doesn't do well under the natural sun, and instead prefers the dark and the bodies that it uses as a food source. Ultimately, regardless of what the Bracken truly is, it is definitely a terror, and one of the few things that has made my heart drop into my stomach upon first seeing this rather unsettling creature. Perhaps the only other thing that has stoked such fear out of me is the endworm back on Europa. I really do not do worms. Hopefully wherever the Eye of Europa has dropped me, I will at least get that form of reprieve.